I looked up at the sky and I said, I promise you, again, it was like this deep prayer. I promise you that I will live in gratitude for the rest of my life. I promise you, blah, 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 blah. And in that moment, something lifted me up.
Mm. Hi, everyone. Before we jump into today's episode, I want to remind you that there are 2 ways to support the podcast. First is through the Finding Fulfillment Together store, which is now officially opened, and you can find items like the sweatshirt I'm wearing now. It says fearfully and wonderfully made. I think it's backwards in the camera, but that's okay. And there's lots of other options in there that will proclaim your Christianity to the world, perfect for you to wear or to purchase for friends and family with Christmas coming up. I hope you find some stuff in there that you like. Also, the second way is to make donations. In the link tree in the description, you will see a way to make donations, and you can do a one-time donation or a recurring monthly donation, whatever works for you. Thank you so much to those of you who have made donations. It truly means the world to me, and to those that choose to do so in the future. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I love you all. Let's jump into today's episode. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Finding Fulfillment Together podcast. I am here with my friend Dana Canneto, and so very excited for you to share your testimony. Welcome, Dana.
Thank you. I'm so very excited to share it. I was just
Yeah.
sharing with Rebecca. It's always hard to go back to the memories of certain parts of it, but yeah, I'm really happy to share this today. So thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, Dana and I have been talking now for several months. I like when you were early on in being saved, I know you reached out to me because you come across the podcast and
Mhm.
just needed someone to talk to. So I completely understand, where you were then, and then to see the change in you, the progress you've made with the Lord. You've been baptized.
Yeah.
So it's just been awesome to be a part of your journey, and to be friends with you, sisters in Christ. And again, just super grateful that you're here to share your testimony on this podcast. So yeah, to kick it off, just if you can start at the beginning, when you were a child, did you have faith in your life as a child?
So yes, I did. I actually, when I was little, I don't know how old I was, but I would take time to, and I think it was moments where I just was feeling low. I would literally go up to my room, write, I would journal, and I love poetry and it would just come out that way. But I don't think I knew then that it was art,
Mhm.
And I remember I would crumple them up and put them in the garbage because I didn't want anybody to read them. But I would put on this music that my dad had. Um, he was very, very, so this will kind of lead as well into my association with, the church and my relationship with God. But
Mhm.
my dad, as like a little boy, actually went and sought out church. His parents didn't go. He was an only child, and one of his friends went, and he wanted to go to church. So he started going on his own. So he'd always been very faithful, but it wasn't something that was like preached at home. It was just like his own thing, and he brought the family with him. And so I went to church. I was always in like the Christmas plays and the Easter plays, and my dad actually led them because he was a musician at one point. So he was very into the art of drama, and would run the Christmas and like the Easter plays at the chapel and stuff. So I was always a part of that.
Okay.
And I went through went to church with them, got confirmed at 12. And what I do remember was it was almost like it was my decision at that point, whether I wanted to stay going to church. And I didn't continue just because I don't know. I don't think I really paid much attention, and it was more like a social hour for me than anything else.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I just decided not to really go, but I always thought of myself as a Christian and believed in God.
Yeah. Was it a Catholic church that you were going to?
Methodist.
Methodist. Okay.
Yeah.
And I just actually saw a clip on Instagram of a pastor saying like we force our kids to go to church.
Yeah.
Yes, we do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it's an important thing as parents. If you know Jesus, you understand the importance of having him in your life. And as a child, if you're going to leave it up to the kid, they don't quite understand the importance of it yet. You really do have
Yeah.
to force when they're younger to keep them in the church, to keep them protected from what
Yeah.
is in this world.
I
So
agree.
yeah.
I agree with that. And my dad was, he was always the one I looked up to. He was like um, he loved kids. He loved bringing us together. Christmas and Easter, like the holidays were like huge in our house, you know?
Yeah.
So I am surprised when I think back to it. And yet at the same time, he was always that one that even when you went to advice, you know, it's funny actually, because now that I'm getting really more acquainted with God and understanding, you know, Jesus's role, and I'm like, wow, this sounds like my dad. Like my dad would like, you know, like I never really fought with my dad. I never wanted to hurt him though, or disappoint him,
Mhm.
right? And so it's just interesting the way that he kind of gave us all free will, right? And you know, it's just funny because when I mean, he's no longer here now, unfortunately, and that's part of the story here. But yeah, I do agree though in some sense. And then there's that balance of like, do you force? Do you like, you know? So it's
Right. Just like
yeah,
I think there is a balance, you know,
yeah,
making sure that they I think I have a friend, yeah, my friend in North Dakota told me she has kids now that are a little bit older, right? They're starting to do their own thing. They're teenage, preteen, and she gives them the option of going Sunday or Wednesday because her church has a Wednesday service, but you
yeah,
have to go to one of them. You know, so
yeah,
it's
yeah,
not forcing them to always be there every single day, but like
yeah,
she says at least once a week, you know. So there's balance, you know.
yeah. It's so
Anyway,
insane.
keep going.
Yeah, I stopped going. No, I love the dialogue. I stopped going, and you know, we always went to the once I got older, we always went to the we really enjoyed going to church though, like on especially on the holidays. And I would say middle school, I was always a very kind of innocent, reserved child.
Mhm.
And then in middle school and high school is really when I started to, as with many of us, like build up our identity. Who am I? Question all the things. And a lot of my life um, relied a lot on people pleasing and what people thought of me, and which spiraled into what I thought was just the way of life, which is like drinking and having fun. I lived in a small town. And so it wasn't that I was like got into it because I had some traumatic, you know, and I feel important to say that because I always thought that my childhood, you know, there wasn't real big trauma. Like, of course, when you get older, you see nuances like, oh, that's
Right.
interesting, you know.
Mhm.
Um, but the drinking was also very associated with like my dad, like, you know, when he celebrated, there was alcohol when, so it was just like a thing. And
Yeah.
I watched the neighbors, you know, so um, you know, in high school, small town, really not much to do and just a lot of drinking. And then that obviously led into college life. Now, when I went to college, it was interesting because I feel like in high school, because it was so small, it was like everybody knew each other. And I stayed home for 2 years. And then when I went to college, I was kind of like, wow, like this is so fun. Like I have my freedom. And
Yeah.
well, then that just led to more drinking and more. And, you know, it's funny again, like, and, you know, I know I'll get to like the point in time where it kind of got really dark. But even when I think back to those times and now what I know more so about like alcohol and we really open ourselves up, like every Sunday night, and this is crazy, I lived in an old house and I used to joke and say, oh, this must be me going through withdrawal, right? Because I was in a sorority. So I would go to like Tuesday, you know, whatever
Yeah.
Tuesday was,
Yeah.
whatever, you know, Tipsy
Yeah.
Tuesday, whatever.
Yep.
Um, and when Sunday I really didn't like drink much. And I would always be woken up by literally feeling, hearing, and sensing a pounding at the bottom of my bed. And I
Whoa.
get the chills when I say that because I think that I was always, I think we all are in some sense, but there's definitely a sensitivity early on
Yeah.
to some of this stuff. And I probably shut a lot of that down even as a child because I don't remember a lot of instances like that. But I was told that I talked to myself a ton when I was
Mm.
little.
Okay.
Um, so after college, the last year of college, I had a group of like amazing people that I was friends with, like both guys and girls, and some of the girls were dating the guys. And I don't know, I always thrived in community
Mhm.
places like that. And
Cool.
when it was time to graduate, and I just want to insert here too, twice. So I went to spring break. I had tried ecstasy
Mhm.
and I loved it. I was like, wow, this just makes me so happy. And I
Yeah.
don't hallucinate. And I, you know, and I've only done it. And I was like, I'm never going to do that again because I knew I mean,
Yeah, you
strong.
liked it a bit too much. Yeah.
Yeah. But I was like, no. So, when I left college, the last month or 2 months, I would say last month, I got really, really depressed, which is not my nature. But I realized that I was leaving some of the closest people that I just spent 3 years with, and I
Yeah.
had the most amazing, fun experiences. And I wasn't hungry. I just couldn't eat. And I remember getting a lot of compliments because
Mhm.
I was losing weight. And because I defined so much of who I was based on my looks or my weight or whatever,
Right.
and because of all the drinking and stuff, I definitely wasn't at my healthiest.
Right. Right.
And then when I left and came home, um, I was I really lost that freedom. I didn't know what was next for me. And I went to the gym and I spiraled and I had an eating disorder after
Mhm.
that. So I never thankfully had bulimia. In fact, I tried and I thought my eyes were about to burst. Like I
Yeah.
couldn't, I was never one to throw up. So
Yeah.
it was just a constant exercising, Bikram yoga, um,
Mhm. Yeah.
cutting my apple into four, just massive, massive amounts of control.
Yeah. No.
Um, I was really kind of down throughout that time. I felt alone. I was then introduced to someone I knew in high school at the gym, probably a few years after graduation. I started dating him. Um, and the first year was incredible. Like I thought like, this is it. Like, this is the guy I'm going to marry. I know him from growing up. And I mean, we weren't really friends in high school, but he did tell me a story in the beginning about he had come back home because he had been using drugs and he's had gotten clean. And, I really respected that he told me that in the beginning. And then one day we were walking and he's like, we should try ecstasy together. Um,
Mhm.
just once, just because we both had a good experience. So we did. It turned into an every weekend thing for about a year. He lived in Manhattan. I still lived where I was. He had just went there for work. So I think that's where kind of it turned for him. I had no idea he was addicted again because I wasn't there during the week. And so I thought I was going just having a night and partying.
Right.
And what spiraled from that is I tried other things. I lost more weight. Um, there was one night I caught him in a big lie and just completely like on everything.
Mm.
And I was just like, I can't do this anymore. And the same day that I did that, I passed out in my apartment like 4 times uh,
Wow.
and called 911 on myself because I didn't know what to do. And, was in the hospital for about a week and a half because my vitals were so low, passed out in
Wow.
the hospital again, and just underweight, dehydrated. I went on a bender that weekend because it was his birthday and we did
Mhm.
all these things. And I was lost. I was really lost at the time. So I vowed that I would never, never touch a drug again. And I never did.
Wow.
So
Good for you.
yeah.
That's
So
awesome.
that was the start of kind of a interesting part of my journey to where um, there was already this kind of aloneness, not, feeling secure in myself. So I
Right.
took a long time to heal. I did date unmatched here and there. And then I met my husband in 2008. So for a good 7 years, I dated here and there. But so I met my husband in 2008. And this is kind of where it all started. There was something mysterious about him, but I couldn't pinpoint it. And it was something I don't subscribe to this now, but at the time, I was very into astrology.
Mhm.
Not that I really followed it, but I was like, oh, I'm Scorpio. The darkness or whatever,
Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah.
um, but I couldn't really pinpoint it. In hindsight, I think I understand now what I was feeling and sensing. And I think this is where I do know now that discernment is a huge gift. I just never trusted or understood what it was.
Mhm.
So there was nights that I would stay over in his apartment and he had told me once that he has this like he has these dreams of this woman with like long black hair.
Mm.
And one night it felt like she was holding his hand. And it was
Wow.
like really creepy. And I was like, that's creepy. So one night we were in bed and I just felt this like, again, pounding on the bed on my
Wow.
chest. My stomach was down.
Hmm.
And I don't remember what we were talking about before that or after that, but I was like, this is that woman. Like, I think this is that woman. And he used to tell me he used to see stuff in his apartment. And now in hindsight, I see where he probably opened himself up. He did stuff in his past that definitely would have already had the floodgates open. He told me about shamanism. I didn't know anything about it, nor was I interested. I was just like, oh, that's interesting. I don't know. He went to Burning
Right.
Man. He was dabbling in different types of recreational drugs here and there.
Mhm.
That stopped when we met because I told him about my ex. I'm like, I can't have a relationship with somebody who's even doing that once or twice.
Right.
So what's odd is that in 2008, 2009, I started to feel ill. Like, I wasn't even into this stuff yet, the new age stuff, but
Mhm.
I would leave there just not feeling well. And I'm like, it must be the heat um, but I would just feel sick. And about 2 years after I found out or about a year after that, I found out I had all these food intolerances. So
Mm.
that'll feed into kind of what I'm going to share in the end. But I do feel like that's a huge attack, food intolerances,
Yeah.
because I mean, so many people in the new age world and spiritual awakening and all this stuff. And all of a sudden they have Hashimoto's or they have, all these, I really do believe that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
um, so now fast forward a little, our relationship was, good. It was going. And that I had no like affiliation really spiritually, except for what I told you earlier, where I was brought up. I do remember worrying a little bit and I don't remember what our conversations were, but I was like, is he an atheist? Because I knew he didn't really have a relation with God. And at that time, I didn't really know what that meant. So it was like,
Yeah.
oh, that's okay. Although Christmas and the holidays were huge for me,
Mhm.
that was a little sad, but I'm like, oh, that'll change, you know?
Yeah.
Um, and then 2010, my dad passed away.
Mm.
And that's really where everything turned. So about not even a month later, my husband and I also moved in together. We weren't married yet because I lived in my dad's apartment and my
Mm.
mom couldn't keep it up. And I had been kind of staying with Diego for like a month before that because he lived closer to the hospital my dad was in for a month.
Okay.
And when my dad passed, I honestly never thought that I would grieve in that way. He was sick for about 8 years, but you would never know it. He had pulmonary hypertension and he
Mm.
looked fine. And I honestly think I blocked out the day that he told us that he had like 2 years to live. And I knew he had 2 years to live, although he lasted 8, thank God.
Wow. Wow.
I think that's because my niece and nephew were born and he was really living his life, like taking care of them. And
Yeah.
so when he passed away, I really felt like I lost a part of my soul. He was like the one person I'd always go to. He just was, yeah. So anyway,
Yeah.
about a month after that, when we were living together, I had this experience on the couch to where this overwhelming feeling, whether it was a voice or knowing that I wasn't living my life. And all
Mm.
I knew was I had to go seek it. I had to go find it. I have a purpose. And
Yeah.
I was working in advertising, just, the rat race and in the
Yeah.
city, la di da,
Mhm.
and glamorous, not at all.
Yep.
So
Mhm.
I went looking. It only took me about a month to decide that I wanted to go to the Institute for Integrative Nutrition to be a health coach.
Mhm.
The point is, I started seeking. And one day my husband was watching an infomercial and this woman was on there and she was a health coach. She got really, really famous.
Mhm.
And I was like, oh, I'm going to look her up. And it turned out that it was an old commercial. So it's so weird that that showed up.
Yeah.
And she wasn't really doing health coaching anymore, but she was into, energy work and priestess. She had a book called The Priestess Training. It wasn't a book, it was a course.
Okay.
And so I purchased it. It was like 1995 and it had like 25 modules. And every time I
Wow.
listened to it, it would talk about these different archetypes. And I was just like, whoa, like my mind was blown. So
Mhm.
here I am now, health coach, getting into all the holistic stuff. I did get tested, learned I had all these food intolerances. During this time, I felt very low also because my husband and I got engaged a year after my dad passed. And my biggest fear ever, and I used to say it all the time, was my dad not being there. We used to
Oh.
dance at weddings. I mean, we were the two in the family that none of my other family members danced. It was like him and I out there, and he
Yeah.
was such a good dancer. So it was just like really sad. Um, I was like holding resentment towards my husband, and because you know, I had told him that. And anyway, it was like a whole thing. So
Yeah.
there was definitely a lot of things I was trying to figure out in my life at the time. The health coaching, then I did this priestess training. Probably listened to that over and over again for like a good year because I just something about it resonated with me. Within that time frame, I met another mentor of mine who I actually started feeling really good with her, and I went to her events. And when I look back now, I'm like, wow, there wasn't really a lot of new agey stuff. It was more just like self-care. And as a woman, you know, there definitely was a lot of it was about your desires and going after your desires and all those things. But
Yep.
within this pod of women, it was like spiraling. Like then I met this other woman, I stepped into her program, and that is where it was very much around energy. And I want to say this isn't how it was presented, but I learned how to use my psychic abilities.
Mm-hmm.
I scared myself in one of the calls because we were to close our eyes and feel into someone's energy. And I named something that was going on for this woman that nobody would have really known. Um, and I felt horrible about it because I felt like I just told her something maybe she didn't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's like about her husband. And but at the same time, I was like, wow, like I have these powers. And, you know, throughout this year, with this course, it really taught you like how to work with your chakras to create your
Mm-hmm.
reality and all this stuff. But it also worked a lot with shadow work.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to say that even though I was going through everything I was going through with my dad, when I went into this, I felt very confident about myself. Like, yes, there was that stuff, but right before I met my husband, I definitely felt like I healed so much, like I was in
Yeah.
a good place. And because there was shadow work done, I started to really not like myself
Mm-hmm.
because what was happening in this dynamic in this course was that so much was being and again, I was very vulnerable. I gave my power away a lot, you know, so I'm not going to say that this is all somebody else's fault, right? But at the same time, it opens up a can of worms and not a good place for a lot of people if they're not understanding this work.
Right.
But basically a lot was projected at me based on the things I need to change about myself because these are my shadow archetypes. Looking back, like I started to definitely be like, oh, that's wrong. I shouldn't, that's wrong of me being too this or too, you know, like all these
Mm-hmm.
things that I started to shut down. At the same time, everybody wanted to get in person. So she held a live event. At this event, there was something called, and I wish I remembered the beginning part of it, but maybe it's just best I don't, because I think there's only like a couple of people that teach this, but it's a certain type of breath work. And you have partners that are sitting with you because they need to like watch you and make
Mm-hmm.
sure that you're okay. And during my experience, I had this excruciating pain that went down my back into my, down to the bottom of my tailbone to where I just started crying
Mm-hmm.
so hard. And this woman
Wow.
like holding me, I'm having all these images of these like sort of goddess dancers. And like, I don't really know what was happening, but there was also a very kind of traumatic experience that I felt within that. So
Yeah.
I'm attributing it to like a past life or, you know,
Mm-hmm.
where there was like this kind of sexual occurrence that wasn't safe.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but till this day, still, I don't know. It was almost like watching someone being tied up, or I don't know.
Um,
But what
wow.
I do remember is that behind me, because we were in a circle, there was a woman jumping up and down, hysterically laughing for about 45 minutes,
Mm.
giggling, talking to something. And meanwhile, I wish I'm having that experience because she's definitely like connecting to something, you know?
Yeah.
And then there's all these other things going on, wailing, crying,
And this is just breath work. There was no like
just breath work.
psychedelics involved or anything. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I have the chills just talking about it.
Yeah.
And then, you know, when we were done, we got up, we shared our experiences. But now what I know, looking back, I'm like, there was so much going on in that room.
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
know?
and this is just a perfect example because there's so many different ways that we can open ourselves up and open these portals to demonic activity,
Yep.
and breathwork is certainly one of them. And a lot of people ask questions about breathwork of like, is it okay? And it's, if you're doing it in a way where you're trying to transcend, you're trying to leave your body, or you're trying to open a spiritual portal, like it is dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I want to touch on shadow work a little
Yeah.
bit because I haven't really talked about that much on the podcast, but because I never really got deep into it. I had a lot of people that asked me to, when I was in the new age world, like, oh, you should do the shadow work retreats. And from what I know about it, and I did have like a shadow work workbook that I was kind of working my way through, but it's really like trying to dig into your traumas, right? And your past and going
Brings up.
back to those
Mhm.
places, right?
So here's the messed up thing about it too. Yes, and everybody does it differently. And I understand why people might think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And I think that in some forms and ways, when you're doing real counseling, that doesn't, first of all, I just licenses and stuff like that, I think are so important. Whereas like in the coaching world, it's like a free for all, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
um with this type of shadow work, yeah, it was almost like, when I look back, I feel like it was like manipulating, because it's almost like you're pointing out so many things that could be traumatic, that it's almost like you're looking for it, where there must be a reason why I'm like this.
Mm.
So let me, oh yeah, my mom was this, or oh, it must have been that, or, and it's like you're conjuring up all these events
Hmm.
to bring yourself back to an experience that maybe you've already worked through already, or you're getting pointed at, right? I don't agree with it anymore.
Yeah.
And it, again, it's that counterfeit of just like perverted just a little bit
Hmm.
to make it seem like it makes sense. And I don't think,
Right.
again, there is, again, a balance,
Yeah.
right?
But I think it comes down to us trying, again, there's no Jesus in this
Yeah, yeah,
conversation,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
There's no
yeah,
turning to the
yeah,
one true God to give your problems
exactly.
to him and allow him to heal you. You're going back into these traumas that you've experienced, and you're not realizing that Jesus was there all along to help you. You're digging in saying, how can I heal from this trauma? What did this cause within me? How do I face this head on? And what I feel like you're really doing is facing your demons. You're
Yeah.
facing what's been affecting you your whole life and going into it again, allowing it to impact you all over again. And while you think you might be healing from it, I think it's just layering it and just making it even harder for you.
I agree. And I actually want to go back to an experience. I told you this might be long.
No, it's fine.
Because it's really important for people to understand, because I've done so much where I see each of these things can really open up to something. So even if you're not practicing mediumship,
Hmm.
did end up starting to do at some point, not to be a medium, but I'll show that in a moment. But
Yeah.
after my dad passed, my husband, and this is already, I think, when I was into the health coaching, and I may have already been starting to look into this other stuff. Um, my husband gave me a gift certificate to see this woman that I wanted to see in Manhattan. And I remember going to it again, discernment, and I'm like, wow, it just feels so creepy in here,
Mm.
Um, it was an old building in New York. She's a young woman, wasn't like this, not that that matters, but I mean, it wasn't
Right.
all
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
witchy, like it was like this very young, exuberant, like lovely woman. But when I went into the room, it was pouring out. Felt like it was like 85 degrees in there. And she said that it was, sorry, it was hot. The windows were open because she was trying to dry a jacket from
Mm.
the rain on it. So it already just felt stuffy and weird. And so we did a session for about 45 minutes, and I left there thinking that I was going to be feeling amazing.
Hmm.
And I remember my husband texted me, and I felt guilty because he bought this gift for me. And I was like, and he wasn't really into it, but he knew I wanted to do it. And
Yeah.
I said, I don't know, I'll talk to you when I get home. And when I got home, I started crying, and I said, I don't know, I feel more depressed than I felt before. I feel like, so to make a long story short, for about 2 weeks, I felt like I had all these thoughts in my head that I was sexually abused.
Hmm.
I had, as I'll say now, demonic thoughts, like definitely like, oh my gosh, like so much depression, to the point that I started Googling, like, what's happening to me? I went to a medium, and I saw these, like, whatever those question sites are, people answering. And then I purchased like $15 to like talk to someone online to see like what, and they did say something about like an entity, but it's again, like, I don't know anything about this stuff yet. So about 2 weeks after, I was so out of, like, I didn't know what to do, that I went to I used to use the sauna at this gym that I was at, and I was in
Mhm.
there. I was by myself, and I was lying there, and I was just like, I don't know how I knew how to do this, but I was just like, I mean, obviously I knew what prayer was, but I wasn't a big prayer person. And I just was like incessantly praying, like, whatever you are, just get out of me. I don't want you here. You're not welcome. Just get out of me. And like, I'm so forceful. And I just literally heard this like noise.
Mhm.
And I felt like it was like center, like something like came out of my stomach. And I'm like, somebody in here? Because I'm like, what was that? Right.
Wow.
Nobody was in
Yeah.
there. So I did it again, just, I don't know, in
Mhm.
case.
Yeah. Yeah.
Heard it again. And chills
Wow.
all over. Cause this is like, you would think, then I realized, but I stood up and I was like, I felt fine. I felt great. I didn't tell
Mhm.
my husband for like a day later, because I was like, am I imagining this?
Right.
Am I
Right.
like, what? I don't know if he really got it, because like you had to be there. But it's like,
Mhm.
now I look at that and I'm like, I literally delivered myself. It was like, that was
Yeah.
deliverance, right? Like,
Yeah.
I t told this thing. So the reason why I share that is because here I am thinking I was sexually abused. I
Mm.
was thinking that like, I was so depressed. Half the time our thoughts are not our thoughts.
Right.
And that's just such proof, right? And the crazy
Mhm.
thing is, as I shared the story, I was like, almost like I was laughing at it.
Mm.
Like, oh my God, listen to what happened to, and it's like,
Right.
no, now that I look back, I'm like, that was so, um,
Right. Wow. That's
yeah.
wild. That's wild.
So, and after that, I continued to work with this woman for another year. And she started getting really involved in plant medicine.
Mhm.
And what's so interesting is she had a huge following, and everybody could start to see where she changed a lot.
Mhm.
Even someone like left her company, because there was just some actions that were taken that were not cool.
Yeah.
And one of them as well happened to me, because there was a event she did that following year that was plant medicine. She did it, which is so fascinating. She did it at the woman's house who I listened to the very first time, that like audio,
Yeah.
over and
Yeah.
over again. And I, it was a very dark experience. Nothing really personally happened to me at that one, but I just remember starting to get a little bit of PTSD the minute I started to feel the plant medicine.
Mm.
Um, I remember being told things. Again, it was the same woman that was doing shadow work. So like, I was doing certain things. She's like, don't do that. Like, it was just like, I felt like I was constantly being told what to do. It was almost like a
Mhm.
mother figure type of thing, rather than being held and supported during something like that.
Yeah.
So, I just, wanted to insert that there, because it wasn't my first rodeo that I went to do another one. And I won't say the name of this event, but it kind of cracks me up, because it definitely was not something that gave me freedom, but it
Mhm.
was meant to. That was like the
Mhm.
whole premise of did plant medicine. The minute I got on the grounds, I felt everything drop inside of me, like even my confidence, like, it was weird, and I just felt
Mhm.
dark. And there were things that happened there that were not cool, that were not safe. And I didn't know any better, because I didn't
Yeah.
know how it was supposed to be.
Right.
Now, when I was in this experience, and now that I look back and I'm watching and I'm seeing again, just people acting in certain ways that was not, and this wasn't just ayahuasca, there was like all different types of things that people were taking.
Yeah.
Um, and I felt again, like I remember lying on the floor talking to someone that had passed away when I was really little.
Mhm.
And it was like a little girl that like, she was a little bit of a bully to me at some point. And I remember lying there talking to her, and well, I thought was her. And like having this experience to where, she was like, it was kind of like she was apologizing. So like there were things that were happening, right? So like it wasn't like I was completely under, but there was just stuff happening. But
Yeah.
there was one point in time that I went outside, and I remember sitting on the deck, and again, just feeling, it was right after I walked into a room and the woman who was facilitating looked at me and said, "Get out
Mm.
of the room." And it was to teach me a lesson to go off on my own because I needed to be by myself. Now that
Interesting.
is like so horrible
Oh,
and
wow.
demonic even in its own right. I'm thinking she's right. I'm always wanting to be in community. I'm right. So there's a
Right.
lot of these
Right.
things like we have, like when I look back, I'm like, wow, so much where I just gave my power away and know this is
Mhm.
how they teach people, and this is why when I was going through my timeline of everything, I'm just like, wow, I feel so foolish thinking back, but at the
Yeah.
same time, I was so in it.
Yeah. And you
Um,
just have this trust, right? Like,
Out of trust.
I can't believe looking back at it, like I met people on a Friday night and like that night or the next morning, that night really. I mean, I took a medication,
Yeah.
a brew that they made. I knew nothing about it. I knew they told me it was okay. Other people had done it. It was just this blind trust
Mhm.
in evil, really, now that I look back at it. And I just fell for the trap. I fell for the deception. And, I used to kind of like laugh at people that were like afraid to drink ayahuasca. And I'm like, you don't even know what you're missing. Like, it's nothing to
Yeah.
be afraid of.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, man, I was wrong.
Yeah.
It is definitely something to be afraid of. And
I
yeah, oof.
I agree. And I just want to say this too for people, that are listening, maybe you've done it and have had a great experience. It's like, okay, there might be a good experience out of some of these things, but then it
Mhm.
just always goes back to the same thing. You're seeking the
Yeah,
next thing. You have to do it
exactly.
again. You never connect in a natural way, right?
Hmm.
And it's always like, oh, it brings me closer to God. It's like, okay, first of all, is it God? And
Hmm.
second of all, what happens when you're not doing it? Because you can't live your life on ayahuasca or any of these things, right?
Exactly. And you know what? I used to join a weekly call because, part of community and they would meet every single week and it would be everyone that drank ayahuasca talking about their life and ups and downs. And when I say ups and downs, it was always dramatic. Either someone was coming straight off of an ayahuasca weekend and they were feeling amazing. They were in what we called the pink cloud. They were feeling
Yeah,
full
yeah,
of love. And then there's people who hadn't drank in a month or two or three and they are just crashing. They feel
yeah,
awful. They want to kill themselves. They feel no, they don't want to live. And the only advice coming through was always, do more plant medicine, get back into your new age practices, do the work, do the work, do the work.
yeah.
And man, I have actually had thoughts about joining those calls and like just preaching, just having a moment of like,
Yeah,
because everyone has a chance to share and
yeah,
just
yeah,
sharing
yeah,
to them like what I now know and that everyone on that call, like all you need is Jesus.
yeah,
That's it.
yeah.
But I know it'll fall on deaf ears and there's a
No, it's
ton of fear in
hard.
actually doing that. But anyway.
I know. I totally get it. And it's hard because even when I was in New Age and stuff, I'd be like, whatever. Like people would be talking
Hmm.
about stuff like that. And I
I
just,
know they would just shut off.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Here's what's crazy too. Well, first I'll just say in that experience, there was a lot that went down that night that was not good. I started to see like, as I thought then, like fairies, but they were like laughing at me. Like there was just all these weird things that I didn't know what was happening. The next day, I did not feel good. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have a good experience. And I'm trying to remember everything that happened in the moment, but I think the kicker was the next morning when, um, there was some stuff that went down that I really was not happy about. I had a really hard time looking at the person that was facilitating it. And so before I left, because I didn't want to leave on bad terms because I had known this person for 2 years or so, I asked if I could have a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
This is where I'm claiming this, and I feel very embarrassed even saying this, that I even thought that this was a thing, but I think I was in a community where there was a lot of that like affection and it's kind of ravey and everyone's cuddling on the couch and
Yep.
that stuff, because that's what it became. And she said, yeah, let's go talk in my bedroom where there's nobody else.
Mm-hmm.
Her house was like very open, and There was somebody else in there, and she asked if it was okay if she was in there, and I knew this woman, so I was like, I guess that's fine. I really didn't feel good about it, but so she asked me to talk to her in energy, not with words.
Mhm.
So like, because she was very tuned in.
Mhm.
Thinking this is great because I have so many curse words in my head right now because I'm so angry.
Mhm.
And so I basically in my head was just like, I'm upset. I'm, and she's like, Now, if she was hearing me, I'm not too sure. But she then
Mhm.
put her hand on my stomach. And after she put her hand on my stomach, she got into a massive coughing fit and almost started like gagging and said that she pulled something out of me
Mhm.
with her hand.
Mhm.
Now, there was another part of this. I don't want to say there was no sexual anything, but it definitely was a weird experience. I don't want to go through I just, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it was, I look back now and I'm just like, wow, that is so weird. And I can't even believe that I wouldn't think that that's just not right. That's not the
Mhm.
right thing to do. Now, maybe something got pulled out of me. I don't know. But all I will say is that the minute I got into the car to go to the plane, I had excruciating stomach pains,
Wow.
excruciating. And about a week or so later, I actually emailed the person saying, oh, sorry, about the day after I got home, even the day I got home, my husband, who's never said anything like this to me, said, I don't know why, but I cannot look at you.
Whoa.
Yeah. Like he couldn't look at me. And I don't know if there was some darkness. I mean, I think I even got home and felt like I looked different.
Mm.
I felt like I aged like 10 years. I was like, something's not right. I was so depressed. I was starting a new job that I didn't even feel like was me. Like I went into that job the next week feeling like this small. Like
Wow.
when I remember going on the interview and feeling great, and it was this small. At the same time, I was going through another program with someone else, and I just felt like, and that was a lot of money, and I felt like I ruined that whole experience, which I think may have been able to help me.
Mhm.
And I didn't tell anybody about this because I felt so, um, one of the archetypes was a victim. So
Mhm.
I felt like a victim if I said anything to anyone because I didn't think anyone else had this experience. So when I got home, I told my husband over and over again I wanted to kill myself. I was crying in the bed. I for about 8 months lived with just hell. I hated myself. I wanted to die. I like I
Mhm.
get every time I tell this part of the story, I get so choked up because this was really the turn of the worst. Um, And 8 months later, I spoke to one of the plant medicine facilitators. So when I talked about the facilitator before, that was a woman that had it at her house. And when I spoke to this woman, she said she stopped doing them. And after that day, they said they were never going back to her house again. And they also, I don't even know if they were still doing the whole plant medicine thing, but I do know that after I spoke to another friend of mine who was also going through some weird stuff that night, that I just thought she was on her journey, and um she was still in a horrible place. So
Mhm.
even though I wasn't fully out, I started helping her because I didn't know she was in that place. And then like a few months later, she started to come out of it. She started working with someone else to try to get herself out of it. I also called somebody else who put me on like supplements for my brain with dopamine and all these things. And like I was doing everything and anything. And I was also going to angel healers. And I don't
Mhm.
know if that was the best thing because they used like the tree of life and a surrogate and the Tai Ching and like all the, how do you say that? I always
I
forget how
don't
you
even
say
know.
Tai
Yeah.
Ching something. So there was a lot that I was dipping my toe in,
Yeah.
going to psychics, going to like, you name it, the money was spent. And
Mhm.
that's another thing that if I was to say to anybody, like, you don't need to spend, God is free, Jesus is
Yeah.
free,
The
like,
Bible is
oh
free
my gosh, the
on the
money
app,
I have spent
Bible
on
app.
all these things, it is
Yeah.
just so painful to think back to.
Yeah.
So that was really like the turn of the worst to where 2014, 2015, 2016, all those years. And again, I had a business. I was health coaching, and then my health coaching turned into helping women with their body. And
Mhm.
then it turned into this whole opening I had about body awakening and the divinity within you and all the spiritual new age stuff. And I did take a break in there because there was no way I could help other women if I was going through this. So it was like choppy in between there.
Yeah.
And I had some part-time jobs in between. And then I reached out to a woman who was a therapist slash very spiritual, who helped me get out of the pit I was in. That probably lasted about 2 years after that plant medicine experience.
Wow.
And I do want to say this. I think this is important because if anyone's listening saying, yeah, well, you went to a place that was very unsafe.
Mm.
Yes. And the person who also went through when I went through was like this woman's pet. Like she went
Mm.
through a beautiful experience with this person. This person didn't do any ill will on her, but she still opened herself up. And I remember talking to her. She was in so much fear that night. And I kept telling her, just like, let me put my hand on your heart. Let me like calm you down. Like she was like, I don't know what's happening to me. And, she was off on her own. And so, it's just not good. There's no reason, like there's no rhyme or reason for it. So I started working with this woman who was a psychotherapist. She was also very spiritual. And I will say she helped a lot with some of the things because she had a lot of compassion for me and what was happening. But it then led me into a 2-year program out in another state, to where I flew there like 5 times a year, and it was live. And again, a lot of shadow work, now I learned a lot through that, but I also think it's because it was mixed a little bit with some like genuine, maybe therapeutic things,
Yeah.
but then also with me building up on my gifts,
Yeah.
quote unquote,
It's all
and
about self. Yeah.
yes, and my
Mhm.
shamanic journey that led me down. I was always into shamanism, but then I got trained in Celtic shamanism,
Okay.
which I always felt was kind of, again, it was like that mystery intrigued me, the darkness. So when that started happening, I would go to sleep at night and I would just see all these faces. Like they were not pretty faces. I mean, and I would be like, as if I'm walking down a hallway, as if I'm walking by these people. A lot of times it was like a hospital hallway and I see a doctor, but then it would morph into like a ballroom with people dancing. Like it was just like, I don't know, spirits but the more I would concentrate, because I'm intrigued, the faces would get close. It's almost like they're inviting me in and the faces would get closer and then they morph and be so ugly.
Yeah.
And then I would stop it. I'd be like, okay, no, I'm not ready. Like I'm building on some gift. And I forget the name of it's like a pampa something, which someone told me that I probably have the gift of helping spirits cross over. It's like I don't know, like a shamanic thing, I think. And that intrigued me. So I went into mediumship to learn about mediumship. And my first couple experiences, I was like, whoa, because I completely think or thought at the time that I was telling this woman about her like babysitter. And I guess this babysitter had passed away. So I'm fast forwarding a little bit, but I do want to say that in between this, my business started morphed into like a shamanic a business for women, and I was using a lot of shamanism, these immersion sessions where I would do a journey before I met with them and tap into their gifts. And I've repented so much for this because it opened them up to probably what they were already open to, but it just confirmation, right?
Yeah.
Now, throughout this entire thing, even though in 2018, 2019, I did start to feel a little bit better, I was not better. Now that I can compare it to how I feel now, so there was spurts of, oh, I'm coming out of this hole that I was in for so long, but my life did not reflect it.
Yeah.
That it was even hard to build my business because I was like, yes, I learned a lot and I can help others, but my life is not reflecting this life that I feel like I should be having. My husband and I, since 2000, we had moved into that apartment after my dad passed, fought incessantly. A lot of it was around spirituality. There was a lot of like anger. I mean, I look now and the enemy was definitely working through him to me because there was a lot of anger there on his side. And then the apartment we lived in also had, from what I understand, mold in it, which did, affected my health even more. So we got it remediated, but I was still affected. So
Yeah.
I don't know if it was just, again, the energy in the apartment of everything that I was doing in there, that when we moved to the other house, I felt a little bit better, but I was doing so many things. I got into the gene keys. I got into, and by the way, like throughout all this, I had been certified in Reiki like 3 times. I was certified in another shamanic practice called Magical Awakenings. Like I
Mm.
had so many certifications up the wazoo, all
Yeah.
these things that just kept opening me up. In
Yep.
2020, I started dabbling in the gene keys and human design, and
Mm-hmm.
we had a really scary year that year, actually. And it turned out that we lived in a house that like backed up to like Camp Smith, where there's a lot of like, I mean, you think about it, it was like where there was, it was, we used to call it the tank drive.
Mm.
There was
Wow.
tanks driving up and down the road. And the reason why I share that is because I would close my eyes. I wouldn't even be sleeping. And I was like meditating, transcendental meditation, like every day.
Mm-hmm.
I would wake up, like not wake up, but I would like hear a voice talking to me, and I would go to like see who it was.
Mm-hmm.
I would close my eyes and literally see people outside our house with like machetes and guns.
Wow.
And then
Wow.
I realized it was probably either affiliated with that or like in that time, right?
Right.
I mean, there
Right.
was a lot of things I was opening myself up to that kind of didn't make sense. I had some old stuff, like I had body dysmorphia that I battled
Mm-hmm.
with for years that pretty much felt like it went away. And I had a massive episode there. Like there was so many things happening. I'm like, we got to get out of this house, or I don't know.
Yeah.
We left that house. We came here. Now, here's the interesting thing. We came to our new house. And in 2021, when we moved, for whatever reason, I said, you know what? I don't even feel like taking out all my crystals. I don't feel like taking out all my stuff. Let me just do my job, because I had a
Mm-hmm.
job at the time, and I'm just going to take like a year off. I probably had one of the happiest years of my life. Like I wasn't doing any of this. House wasn't filled with anything. 2022, I started, okay, I'm going to bring up the business again.
Mm-hmm.
I started bringing in my shamanism. Things started to go really well from 2020. Well, 2022 wasn't bad. 2023 into early 2024 was like amazing from the perspective of money was really
Mm-hmm.
coming in.
Yeah.
2023, I started to feel something. It was like March, and I'm like, something is changing in me. I don't know if I
Mm-hmm.
want to do all this spiritual stuff anymore. At the same time, anything I put out there was crickets.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, oh, it's probably because my energy isn't aligned anymore, and I'm like blaming my energy.
Yeah. Right.
And then yeah, and just to say too, like manifestation, everything. I was doing it all, Rebecca,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
everything. And
Yeah.
really shaming myself because my life didn't reflect the way my mindset should be and my vibration. So I
Mm-hmm.
blame myself because my vibration isn't high, because I
Mm-hmm.
was so down in the dumps because of everything else that was affecting me. And then 2023, when that happened, I was like, you know what? I probably shouldn't quit my job yet, because I still had a job that I was doing kind of part-time. Like I felt like part-time because they weren't that busy.
Yeah.
But then I lost my job, and we had debt because of everything I was doing. And so
Mm-hmm.
from June till December of last year, and mind you, I was doing this free astrology thing that, like, now that I look back, like I was in it,
Mm-hmm.
trying to figure out what is going on with my life. Why is this happening? Where are the stars? Where's my, what's my
Yeah.
past life? What's this? What do I got to clear?
Yeah.
It consumed me 24/7 because of everything that was going on. Um, I had a few occurrences last year to where I met, this is so funny, to where I met or knew of some people that were Christian, and like they would pop up on my feed or whatever and be like, why do I, they just have like, I wasn't even really thinking it, but it was just an occurrence of like, wow, they're like, there's something about that person's energy, or like I have someone
Mm-hmm.
in not my immediate family, but I was like starting to notice them more, and I'm like, they just seem so, I don't know, happy, or
Mm-hmm.
so it's so kind of
Yeah.
weird to think back to it now. And then now to this year, January, uh, I got sick for like 18 days, right when I thought I had a revelation and like where I wanted my business to go. February, our cat got really ill. We had to put thousands of dollars out. Mind you, I was getting no income at this point. every resume I put out there was going on deaf ears because my job position has really changed a lot. I was very lucky in the last place that I was
Yeah.
at. Nothing was happening. And then March, this is another story, but I'm not going to go into it because could be for
Mhm.
another time, but it was, something happened to where I suddenly fainted. I also
Mm.
think that was an attack, but I fainted, broke my foot, my right foot. So I could not go
Mm.
anywhere. Um,
Wow.
and that was for about a good month and a half, like literally catered on because I broke my foot, sprained my ankle, and my toe
Oh,
had
wow.
either like injured or something. I couldn't move it. Um, and I joked with my husband, I'm like, wow, God really wants me to sit down, but I'm not thinking of the God, like so I'm
Right.
meditating during that time. I'm trying to figure
Mhm.
out my life. Then that was probably that was Easter of March, so about May. And then May through June was our cat passed away. So it was
Mm.
almost like every month was something that just kept stopping me. I had like I hyperventilated in our kitchen one day. Like I was just so stressed, like what is
Yeah.
happening? So come June, I would cry a lot and my husband would be like, it's okay. He knew, like, I don't know if it's gonna be okay. Like, we might have to move. And so it was like 3 days before I knew, like, okay, I'm gonna have to go out and like figure this out.
Right.
Um, so I for like 3 days, 4 days in a row, I can't remember exactly. I woke up like even earlier, went out on my chair and just because I didn't want to keep crying in front of him. I didn't want to stress him out. And I just like
Mhm.
bawling my eyes out. What do you want from me? Like, what do you like? If this is my purpose, why are you not letting
Mhm.
me get the clarity? And I'm like talking to God,
Yeah.
and I just said, like, please, I just some reprieve, like drop a name, drop something. What do I need to know? And it was like the third day, and I was like on my little like in my chair, but also on my footstool thing, just excruciating pain, praying, and something happened in that moment. Even a name dropped in. Um, and I felt like I'm going to use this word now, delivered, because I didn't really understand it before. I felt like I was delivered from years of whatever the suppressed feeling was.
Mhm.
Um, I now know, I didn't know in that moment, of course, that certain food intolerances went away,
Mm.
especially chocolate. So I'm like obsessed now.
Yeah.
Which was crazy that I mean, certain things I haven't tried yet just because I'm like, I get so sick that I'm like, oh, I don't even want to go there yet. But
Yeah, yeah.
um, for about a month and a half, I know I've shared this like in our group, I'm like, I was like, and I will say this too, be a few weeks before, maybe a month before, I was looking around my office space going, my life does not reflect all the things that I should be doing, that it should, with all the things
Mhm.
that I'm doing. I
Right.
kept getting these hits of just getting rid of everything,
Mhm.
right? And I didn't do it because I'm like, am I crazy? Like the minute this happened, I came down to my basement. I started packing up stuff. I hadn't even looked this up yet. I didn't even know what happened to me
Yeah.
because the funny thing is that day too, about an hour later, I found an opportunity that brought in, and again, this isn't all about the money, but it brought in like $22,000 in like a month or a month
Wow.
and a half. And it was because I was like, wow, this is like incredible. And I was so passionate about it. I shared it with people. It
Yeah.
was gonna be a long-term thing. Probably I didn't know. I was just like, and
Yeah.
helped me reserves and things I need to pay off. And I mean, that's so quick, but it's like
Yeah.
it that day, it's like I can't
Wow.
make that up. And
Mhm.
also for weeks, I was just like flying high. I was like, this is incredible. And I
Yeah.
knew that it was God, like the true God. And one last thing I'll say here before we is that after that experience happened, I literally went on my computer and I was like, I didn't even know what to put. I was like healing to God, like healing, like, and
Right.
then I realized I saw these like new age to Jesus testimonials, and that's where I found your testimonial. And I just like listened to so many with my mouth on the floor because so many people's experience was my experience. And I'm
Yeah.
like, this, you can't make this up, And so ever since then, I've still been delivered from those oppressed feelings. It's honestly miraculous. And the funny thing too is last year my word was faith.
Mhm.
So even though I knew I was going through the money stuff, I'm like, well, okay, God, you're really working on my faith.
Yeah.
Miracle was the word this year. So
Wow.
it's like, if that wasn't a miracle. And yeah, ever since then, I just have felt, even though like my life isn't fully figured out and I've been in a lot of refining now,
Mhm.
aside from being delivered, like from those things, the faith is there.
Mhm.
It's not, does it waver? I think it does with everybody, but
Yeah.
it doesn't at the same time. That makes sense.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know?
Man, it's amazing to me the story that because it's such a like familiar story for people that go through new age is you get a little bit of healing and then you're like, well, what else can I do? And what else can I do? And what else can I do? And like you said before, you have all these certifications and you're doing Reiki and medium readings and plant medicines, and it just keeps going and going and going and going. And every single thing you do, you're opening yourself up more and more and more and more to demonic oppression and potentially demonic possession, like you had probably had an entity within you, like you
Oh
felt
yeah,
it leave your body,
for sure. Mhm.
So, yeah, it's so amazing to me how in that realm or in that community, if you will, like you just don't see it. You don't see what you're doing. It feels good. It feels right. It feels like you're just healing and then you're helping others to heal. And it's just love. But what's interesting about your story, which is very different from mine, is like for me, the ayahuasca and plant medicines like always brought positive feelings, and I always left there feeling love and light and like just like an angel. But I know you are not the only person that I've heard that, comes out of it feeling dark and
Yeah,
like you have something attached to you. And we have people in our group, in the New Age to Jesus group, that understand exactly what you experienced because they experienced it too. But what's wild is that a lot of times people experience that and their teachers or their community that they're in tell them, oh, that's just part of the process. It's part of the healing. Keep going back.
yeah,
Like that means you have to go deeper, and then even though you felt the negative feeling, you felt the results of the demons that you were in the presence of, you still keep going back.
yeah. It's so true. And I mean, there's so many times too that I feel like God was knocking on my shoulder, and
Mm,
again, I know our journey is our journey, yet I always question like, I wonder if our free will, like when we choose something sooner, does it pivot it a little? You know what I mean? And
yeah.
in 2000, I want to say it was 11 because it was a few months before my husband and I got married.
Hmm.
I had a pain that just started like right here and it would shoot up to my forehead.
Oh, wow.
If I smiled, if he kissed me, it was 24/7. It wouldn't go away.
Wow.
So I was going to work and like I couldn't smile. And more than not, I would cry because
Mm,
any peck, anything. Now, I was being told by doctors I had MLS, uh,
okay.
trigeminal neuralgia. I mean, so many things. And something inside of me kept saying no, right? And you hear that whole like,
Hmm.
don't accept any words over you that are not, like, or curse or whatever. It was like I was not accepting. Okay, if it was, it was, but unless it's proven to me, I'm not, so all these tests stopped at my parents because I told my husband, I said, I just need to be on my own because I have to work through it. Like, I'm just so depressed right now. And I went to my parents had lived in a townhouse in a pool. My dad had already passed. So this is like a year after. And he had these books on like, positive stories. And I started reading it. And sorry, before I was reading the book, I went out to the backyard. I had no shoes on. And I looked up because I know I complained a lot about like work and like stuff like
Hmm.
that. And I thought, wow, I complain about all those things. And this is just, I looked up at the sky and I said, I promise you, again, it was like this deep prayer. I promise you that I will live in gratitude for the rest of my life. I promise you, blah, 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 blah. And in that moment, something lifted me up.
Mm,
Something lifted me up. And I didn't tell my husband until
mm,
like a day later because it was just this light. And I went
yeah.
to the pool. I came back the pain would come and go, come and
Mm.
go. But what happened was, right, God sets things up for 2 days later. I was speaking to a holistic doctor of mine, and she said to me, she was asking all these questions like, I know you're getting married soon. Do you feel like you're going to lose yourself? And I was like, it just it dawned on me. I said, no, but I feel like I lost myself since my dad passed. And I told her
Mm.
about all this guilt I felt because I was now a health coach and I feel like I could have probably helped him. I think I know now what was going on for him. And I
Yeah.
mean, um, so she said, have you shared this with anybody? I said, no, not really, because I don't want to bother like my family or anyway. It turned out like I was holding on to so much grief, and I wasn't expressing it. And
Mm.
then I finally talked to my mother about it and cried, and it just went away. Right.
Mm.
But like it started that moment, right, that I prayed, and in that moment, like some of it had already went away. So whether it
Yeah.
was that and it just, I don't know, but it's like now that I look back at that experience, I'm like, that was God.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
this time also was different. I think it was, I feel like it was like, okay, it is your time. We'll let you off the hook now. You know what I mean? Thank you for coming to me, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, right. And that gratitude is huge when we really step in and feel it, not just say it, not just, like
Yeah.
say the words, but really feel it in your heart, like how grateful you truly are. Like, because I was just thinking about it this morning. I was going through the list of things I have to do this and this and this. And then I was like, Lord, I am lucky to be able to do those things, like to have this list of things that, I have to prepare for Thanksgiving with my family. Boo hoo. You know what
Yeah.
I
Right. I
mean?
know.
Like,
I
yeah.
actually want to ask you a question on that because I feel like when I was in New Age, as much as I would say I'm grateful and try to get into gratitude, it never felt authentic. But now I almost can't contain my bliss and
Yeah.
gratitude when I
Yeah.
think about God and my relationship and how it's built and just who I am,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. And my
Right.
first thought is I think that comes from like before I was grateful for everything that I had, all my material possessions. I was grateful for my life. And it was all at the end of the day self-centered.
Hmm.
I was grateful for I didn't believe that someone gave me these things or that, that they were from God. I just was grateful that I had created what I created and had all the opportunity that I had because I was so smart and so, strong and had such strong willpower. But now I realize it has nothing to do with me, that every single thing I have is from the grace of God.
Yeah.
Ooh, I'm getting emotional because
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
just like from the moment I was born, he
Mhm.
he birthed me into a family that was gonna love me,
Mhm.
Like not everyone gets that,
Yeah.
so I'm so grateful. And then for the fact that I turned away from him time after time after time, I rejected his existence.
Yeah.
And yet he still came and saved me,
Yeah.
like that's gratitude that I can't explain.
I have chills just you saying that because it is
Yeah.
so true. And it's like what I was having this conversation. We had company yesterday and they are very much, um, lovers of Christ and we are talking about even just like when we are going into any worrying of like what's to come next or something, it's like everything's a season. And when we're present and we just take the next step, whether it's something we want to maybe do or not. And I remember in New Age, even if like, let's just say we're low on money and I was like, oh, I should get a job. And it's like, no, because I am not claiming my worth if I'm going to go get a job that you know what I mean? So it's
Hmm.
just like this sort of, and I don't know if that made sense the way I said it, but it was almost like, don't do anything you don't want to do because that's just a block within yourself, or like
Right.
there's another
Right.
block, or whereas now it's almost like, Lord, show me what I need to do at this minute to like provide, to create happiness, to create, and those things that you do, you bring that with you.
Hmm.
If
Yeah.
you have to do something you don't necessarily want to do, it's a different experience now because you're doing it through God and
Yeah.
not through your
And
own
really for him and
for
for his
him.
glory.
Yeah.
And it's like it's a process. It's been a long
Oh
process and
yeah.
it's going to go on forever, but it's a process of dying to self.
Mhm.
Like it's not about me. And I pray for that every day, that he just like remove me from the equation.
Mhm.
Like let your will be done through
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
Let your will be done and help me to know what is your will versus my flesh,
Yeah.
and it's so the desires are just they're so different.
Mhm.
Like when I think about money, I want enough to survive, of course. I want to be able to eat and keep a roof over my head and, provide for my family. But it's all about, for me, is how can I like serve him?
Yeah.
Like, so how can I just live in a way that glorifies him and honors him? And of course, I want to be able to give back, So the more I bring in, the more I can give back. But yeah, even the idea of like making money and like it's just not,
Yeah.
I don't know. I just feel like that's going to happen naturally if I'm serving him. He'll make sure that I'm provided for,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
I agree. And I think it's also because the experience I went through, and I know that I was led to go through that experience for
Yeah.
several reasons, especially this. And something I was going to say before, I kind of lost my train of thought there on this, but it saddens me now because there is such a, like what you said about like turning away, there is
Hmm.
such a stigma and then not understanding of the difference between like relationship with God versus
Hmm.
religion, right? And when we
Right.
think about it, when we really think about it, we are all part of our religion, whether
Hmm.
you believe in God or not, or you're in the New Age, or you're agnostic, or you're atheist, or you're like, we're all part of something. So you can't even, like my husband be like, I hate religion. It's like, in a way, you have one because
Right.
you have to believe in something or
Right.
not. And that's kind of one too, right? So it's just if we just remove that from the table
Yeah.
and be curious and like just just be open. There's so much closed offness, and I understand it because there is so much dogma and
Yeah. Yeah.
just untruths. And it's just like yes, we have to seek how it feels good for us, but it's still God in the end, you
Right.
know? So
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just getting to know him.
mm,
Like, and that's all, again, it's a process. It's a
all we
sanctification
need.
process,
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
like building that relationship with him. So I want to hear a little bit more though about, okay, so you have this moment
Mm,
and you start watching the, New Age to Jesus testimonies and understand, like feeling it, right? You're feeling what everyone's saying. So now you step into reality that, it's Jesus. Like,
mm,
and that's not, I know for me anyway, it took several months for me to like truly be like, okay, I get it. Like,
yeah.
what was that like for you, that like kind of shift? Because that's the hard for me. Like, I mean, for a lot of stories that I hear anyway, that's a hard part, of like giving up everything you thought you knew,
Yeah.
humbling yourself to say I was wrong, and then really finding out who Jesus is.
Yeah. It's actually interesting because I literally, I think I started reading the Bible right away from what
Hmm.
I remember. But I actually, when this happened, it's kind of a little naive, but it's funny, and I'm kind of glad it happened this way. But I feel like I felt so relieved, first of all, that I
Hmm.
don't need to do all this stuff, these hours of meditation and affirmations. And,
Yeah.
and I was working with another person, more than one person in this thing, but just something I'm like, wow, there's so much we have to do in this. Like, do we just do this every day to
Yeah.
like some people having great lives. They don't do this every day. And it was always
Yeah.
in the back of my mind, but still there was something like, oh, I don't know. They say do this. So there was an element of relief. Now, the other thing is I think I went into a little bit of like I didn't even know this was a thing, but I think I went into a little bit of a cessationalist,
Mm.
to where I was like, oh, nothing spirit, like,
Mm.
because I think a lot of religions too don't really talk about spiritual warfare and
Yeah.
religion, like spiritual stuff. So I kind of was so in the Pollyanna-ish of like, oh, gee, I love Jesus. I so love you. Like I'd be washing the dishes and I'm like, I'm Jesus's bride. Like he's
Yes.
my
Yeah.
husband. Sounds so funny and stupid when you think about it, but it's like it's true. Like you
Yeah.
get this, like I'm like, whoa. And the more I like, of course I read, I think I started with the book of John. Like I just was like, wow,
Yeah.
just like So, and at the same time, I had, my husband who doesn't really subscribe to this. Now, was he not happy that I felt so lifted? And, I told him I was going to read the Bible. He's like, good, like, do your research. And I think he thought I was going to
Mhm.
like, oh, well, this is, instead I'm like, this is amazing,
Right.
So there is definitely a challenge there. It's still a little, I mean, although they're deep conversations, but um I feel like because I grew up the way I did and I started to already have these feelings, like we went to a picnic in May of this year. So this was before this happened in June.
Mhm.
And this couple was sitting with my family and she was telling my sister, "Oh, we've been praying for so and so," without going into the story, but and I was like, "Oh, wow, they like that makes so much sense. Like they're just a good energy people." Like, and then she was sharing
Mhm.
how her husband, they actually have Bible study nights like at their and I totally forgot that. I think he's like ordained or something, but I was like, and that was May. Like I had,
Mhm.
and I was just like, so in a way, I feel like there was like this, like not that I needed someone to say like, yes, this is true what you're feeling,
Mhm.
but it was like when that all happened, I was like, wow, this all makes sense. Like
Mm.
in a moment, everything made sense while I was feeling the way I was feeling, why I wanted to get rid of things. And I have to say the testimonials, I mean, they were just
Yeah.
like for anyone going through this, like immerse yourself in
Yes.
testimonials,
Yeah.
But so I would say the thing that shifted, so I would say now we're into like July, so having June, July, maybe like the beginning of August. So I ended up getting COVID. So that knocked me out a little bit. But then I started like joining kind of groups, like all like right away. I
Mhm.
found this woman. I don't even know how I got on her podcast, and it was the one that she shared where she changed her business in
Okay.
accordance to God and not like so many
Yeah.
things just kept Maddie Pruitt, who
Oh,
like
yeah.
I didn't know she had a podcast. That was a name that got dropped in.
Mm.
And she had like only 2 podcast episodes and I like binged on those for like I don't know, whatever 5 weeks, and every time I wanted to know something, like, I was like, "Oh, spiritual warfare, that makes sense. That's just like in the new age thing, but this."
Mhm.
And then all of a sudden she would come out with a podcast about spiritual. It was like things just kept falling
Yeah.
into place like
Yeah.
that. But um, so I don't think there was a point in time that I ever really I definitely didn't question it, but I was scared, and I still am a little bit,
Mhm.
to talk about it.
Mm.
In this context, not really, but like, some of the people who are in the circles that I maybe did partnerships with, or I was talking about doing partnerships with, it's just, and you can't negate it because even at any time or any moment, and this is why it's so true. Not that I ever thought to go back to the old stuff, but even if I played with my mind a little bit and been like, do I want to go back? And it's just like such an aversion. Like
Yeah.
something even drops into my feed around it, and I'm
Yeah.
like, unfollow. I can't do it. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if I answered your
Yeah,
question.
no, I get what you're saying though, because I still have moments, especially, when I'm around non-believers and especially people that are like really open about their rejection of religion and Christianity. It's still like uncomfortable to talk about it and to share. Once I do though, like even if it like someone asks me a question, I'm like I'm ready to open up, but it's still there's still that fear there. And I think part of that, and we might have this in common, is like that spirit of um people pleasing, for lack of a better word, like that spirit of like wanting everyone to like me
Yeah.
and still being afraid that someone's gonna like push me away because of my faith. And friends have.
Yeah.
And that is something that I still struggle with because I think it's still kind of something that lingers around, is that desire to please everybody. And when you're speaking about Jesus, there's a whole lot of people that are not going to be pleased by that,
Right.
you know.
Right. One other thing as you say that, there were moments even in New Age where, which is so crazy when I think back to it, but like, I would say like, I connected with Jesus. Like,
Mm.
I felt like, and even Mary at certain points. So like, even if, again, like I'm always thinking about like people are listening, right? Like even if
Yeah.
someone's listening or they're like, but I connect with Jesus, or
Mm-hmm.
it's like when I look back now, I'm like, that wasn't Jesus,
Right.
first of all. And second of all, the the fear in talking about it too, is so much there. And also I keep just saying to myself, like, and very much in prayer around this of, and there's a whole thing with like Esther that I'm working on right now, like the story of Esther, of like,
Mm-hmm.
if I perish, and
Mm-hmm.
like this could save someone, you
Right.
know. And I
Right.
just had a conversation with someone, I think I even shared it, but he was not really, someone close to him just passed away, and he reached out to
Mm.
me right after this happened, which was crazy. So I was like all in it, and I'm
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
look to God, find a church, find a community, and he just messaged me the other day. And, I was even saying things that were shocking me, but I'm like, this is God. This is not
Right.
me. Like, he's speaking through me. And this is the exact time that you reached out.
Yeah.
And, he just said recently, like, I no longer feel like I want to kill myself. Like,
Wow.
and the church accepted him.
That's
And it's like,
amazing.
that's God's work. So
Right.
even
Right.
though I get scared, I'm like, but this could help. And then I'm like, oh, but you might get stoned,
Yeah,
like,
I know. I know.
and
But
it's
that's the fear I feel like that we need to keep pushing through and going back to his word, because his word says to, take up your cross and follow me, create disciples, spread the good news. And while it's uncomfortable, I think it's our job as Christians,
yeah.
and the more you do it, the more you see the fruits of it, and then you just don't want to stop. And I still have this kind of issue, if you will, with social media where like I want to get off Instagram, I want to get off Facebook because I find myself scrolling, wasting time scrolling, but also because I still think about what people are going to think every
Mhm.
time I post something. And I'm thinking about the people that, are my old friends, my judgmental friends, my ones that I know are going to be judging me because they've told me what they think of what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And I still have those thoughts cross my mind every time I post something. But when I think about coming off of it, I remember that there are so many people that are hearing the name of Jesus that wouldn't hear it otherwise
Mhm.
because they weren't following me because of Jesus. They follow me because of my traveling or whatever.
Yeah.
And there's always people that I run into that tell me, "Oh, yeah, I follow you still." And like literally just this morning, I went back to the gym that I was going to 2 years ago, decided to go back because they had these really good classes first thing in the morning. And the instructor was still the same from 2.5 years ago. And she sees my face and I'm like, "Do you remember me?" And she goes, "Yeah, I follow your blog," she called it,
Oh,
And I was
wow.
like, "Oh, really?" And I didn't know that. Like she follows me on Facebook.
Yeah.
So she's seeing that. Even I don't know if she's a Christian, but she's seeing it and she's hearing the name of Jesus. And she's one of many that I don't even know anything about. So like I do feel like I should stay on, and I just need to pray about disconnecting from those people-pleasing tendencies.
Totally. And you know what I think too? I think it is probably a lot harder for us because we came out of that community and new age.
Yeah.
And the reason why I say that is because I can be in a community and somebody has lived this way for years and they're just blasting it off, not as like
Right.
preachy, but like the Lord
Right.
is good, and like
Right.
in that way.
Exactly.
And it's like, yes, he is. Like other people are cheering on, and I'm like, oh, because they've already, like, they're just like, this is such a change for us in a sense
Right. Yes,
that
that
it
is
makes
so
it,
true.
yeah.
Because I'm still in this, like, I know there's people following me that are in New Age. I know there's people following me that are atheists. It's not like just my church friends, that are following me on these platforms. So I do feel like I'm still this new creation because I am, but like that shift is still uncomfortable. Where like 3, 5 years from now, I probably won't be having this issue at all.
Yeah.
I'll just be talking about Jesus still, though. I
Yeah.
know that much.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I'm that type too. It's like when I'm excited about something, like I just
Yeah.
want to share it. I want to help people. And
Right.
same, like
Right.
I want though people to want to hear it. And like I have a
Right.
Facebook group, I'm still navigating, like
Yeah.
even my podcast.
Right. Right.
Totally
And the
switching
thing
gears
is,
on
God created us. Like God created us this way for a reason,
that.
but he wants us to be on his side, like all the things we were sharing, and we both have podcasts and businesses, like that were talking about healing people, wanting to help people. And that's wonderful. That's exactly what God wants us to do. These are the gifts he gave us, but now he wants us to do it for his kingdom, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So,
I know. And the last thing I'll say is it's just the whole refining process is also looking at, okay, like, what does it look like now to pivot? Like, not just personally,
right.
but now in my business, it's like, what do you want me to do? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I
Yes.
have to really be, because I used to, oh, I want to do this and I'll throw this out there, or I'll, in the podcast, or do I start a whole new one? Do I continue the one? You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
there's so
Yeah.
much involved in it. And at the same time, though, it's so much more fulfilling that way. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah, and I think an important practice that I've been trying to get better at, because I'm very like, when I get an idea, I just want to do it. You know, I just want to get online and put it out there. I'm learning to slow down and to talk to God about it and to ask him to confirm if it's a good idea, if it's aligned with his will or not. And I'm like, if this is not something that's going to serve you or glorify you, then just don't let it happen, or tell me clearly, give me some kind of confirmation that tells me this is not the way to go. But if it is the way to go, give me confirmation that it is. And I don't always get clear responses to that, but I've learned to slow down and pray about it and really be sure, like, and feel it in my soul that I'm making the right choice for him and it's not coming from my flesh.
yeah, totally agree. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, this was awesome. Thank you so, so much for sharing all of the details. I know there was a lot of vulnerable stuff there that you shared, but I think all really important because there's so many people that are walking that path of, wanting to heal, seeking a connection with God, just spiritual seekers. That's really what New Age attracts is spiritual seekers. It's just like, I guess the advice would be go to Jesus first,
Mhm.
talk to Jesus, pray to him, read the Bible, because the rest it's just honestly deception that takes you further from him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely agree. Yeah. And there's one way.
Mm.
We don't need all the 60 books that I had on my shelf of the way to get to a place.
Yeah,
And
exactly. All the answers were in the Bible the whole time. I still am shocked by that.
well, that's just it too, for those listening, like either from New Age or, I mean, I think that was one of the biggest things that where I was like, wow, I understand this so much more now because I was in New Age. Doesn't mean go do that first. And it just means that
Yeah,
everything is so perverted. Like it's
right.
just counterfeit. Like everyone said, like he says, like it's just, and I can see where people are like, well, we do this here. Isn't this like I said something to my husband? He's like, well, isn't that witchcraft? And I'm like, no, it's not witchcraft because
Yeah,
you're working through God. Like it's
right.
not,
Exactly.
there's,
Exactly. It's not going outside of him looking for healing or looking for, it's not trying to manipulate energy. It's just relying on the power of God.
Mhm.
That's at the end of the day all we can do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
So anyway, if anyone wants to get in touch with you, or look you up, is what's the best way for them to do that?
I would say Instagram at Dana Canneto. I'm also on Facebook. I'm pretty much on every social media platform at Dana Canneto and my website, Dana Canneto. But, um, Rebecca's testimony too is on my podcast, The Luminary Woman. And those are probably all the best ways to reach out.
Okay. I'll link stuff in the description for everyone to be able to reach you and follow you.
Yeah.
And yeah, I've just again really enjoyed being along the journey with you, and watching, the Lord come to life inside of you. So I'm just
Yeah.
grateful that we've connected and thank you again for being here.
Yeah. Well, and thank you because you've helped me so much throughout my journey. So, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. I'll talk to you soon. Thank you so much for sticking around to the end of the episode. I want to let you know that there are 3 different ways that you can get in touch and be a part of the Finding Fulfillment Together community. The first way is through our New Age to Jesus Zoom calls and our Telegram chat. So I have a group of people that have gone from having New Age beliefs to now knowing Jesus that have come together, and we meet twice a month on Zoom where we talk all about our journeys, what we're going through, spiritual warfare. We have so much in common. It's such an amazing group of people. Love for you to be a part of that. Just click the link in the link tree to sign up. And you can also click the link for the Telegram chat, which is just open all the time. Same group of people there there that you can communicate with on a regular basis. So see both of those links in the link tree. The second way to get in contact and to be a part of community is through one-on-one calls with me, which are completely free. So if you just want someone to talk to, if you have questions, if you're kind of struggling with faith in Jesus, you're coming out of New Age, or just in general, just want someone to talk to about Christian faith, maybe you don't have a lot of people in your life that you can talk to, please call me. I love all kinds of discussions. Even if it's not about Jesus, if you just need a friend, want someone to talk to, my calendar is open. You can find the link to book time with me in my link tree as well. And last but not least, I have a Facebook community for women. So sisters in Christ to come together and share our faith, talk about Jesus, support each other. And you can find that link in the link tree as well. All of these are free. All of these are just opportunities for us to have community and support each other. And I hope that you take advantage, and I hope to see you there. And with that, I just want to say goodbye. Thank you so much for being here, and I will see you next time.